Hey, Bruce Williams, Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. Very pleased and proud and actually a little bit excited to announce the kickoff of our Chamber Chats. It's a series of video podcasts, in other words, a vodcast, and we're going to show you the first one right now. We do these in the studios at Czech Television, proudly presented by Island Savings, a division of First West Credit Union. Take a look at the Chamber Chats. Hi, and welcome to Chamber Chats. Chamber as in Chamber of Commerce. I'm Bruce Williams, CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce, and these chats are with business and government leaders to talk about what's going on in the world, COVID-related, recovery, and otherwise. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I live and work in the traditional ancestral territory of the Lekwungen-speaking Coast Salish nations, in particular the Songhees and the Esquimalt. Today we're going to talk about something that the provincial government has undertaken to support small and medium-sized businesses, and joining me to do that is the MLA for Gordon Head. He is also the Honourable Murray Rankin, Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. Murray, Minister, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Bruce. Great to be here.
So some changes were announced in the way that small and medium business are going to be supported, and the changes were made because the available funding wasn't being accessed to the level that the government had hoped, to something like the degree of 30% of it had only been claimed. So you want to give this money away and you want to get into the hands of business. So we want to talk about the changes you made, one of which I thought was brilliant, and that is to simplify the whole submission process, because it was quite complicated in the beginning, wasn't it? So tell me about that.
It was, I think, too much so. And I think the Chamber, to your credit, was very effective in reaching out to government and saying, we like the program, but you could do a better job of making it more accessible. We have a job to do as well, Bruce, which is why I'm on the program and very pleased to be here. And that is to get the message out to small businesses. Our economy is based on small business to a degree that most people don't appreciate. They think, oh, we're a government town, or, we've got the universities and so forth. That's not true. The largest employers remain in the high tech and the non-high tech and the retail and the restaurant and all the tourism, of course, sectors. They're small business operators, and they have been, to varying degrees, hit very hard through this pandemic, as all of your members know. So we started off with this program. I just want to get the highlights out quickly.
Sure.
There's up to $10,000 to $30,000 available to small businesses who qualify. Now, the point is that is not a loan. A lot of your members, Bruce, will have taken advantage of the federal loan programs, but this at this moment in time is bridge financing to help the small business sector just get over the next hump, this very difficult quarter that we're in right now. A lot of us are hopeful with the vaccine and all of that on the way, but this is a very dark winter, and this is to try to help with $10,000 to $30,000 as a grant. I repeat, grant for people to take advantage of. And one of the things I think your chamber, if I'm not mistaken, advocated for, which we've done, is we've simplified the criteria and also made very clear that you must have a business recovery program, some kind of business plan to get you out of this mess after we do so. And we're providing, on top of the $30,000, $2,000 to your favorite chartered professional accountant or business advisor who can get you on track, get the best advice. So that, I think, is a very practical thing we're doing as well. And we've simplified it. We've made the criteria, we can talk about them, a lot less dramatic. You don't have to be in, you can be, for example, 18 months only, rather than 3 years.
Instead of 3 years, correct.
Little things like that we've done that I think will make it a lot more user-friendly.
So the $2,000 that would go to a financial or business professional to help someone maneuver all of this stuff, does that flow directly to that person, or does it flow through the business that's receiving the grant?
I think it flows through the business, but it's guaranteed money. I actually just called my accountant today to make sure he was aware of it. And there's a little quick and dirty thing, apply online for it, and you get registered immediately if you're a chartered professional accountant. They're all going to be eligible. But, if your brother-in-law is a business advisor, he may not be, immediately available. So there's obviously some, we have to be accountable for public money, obviously, and that's what the check is there. But it's very simple. The form has been streamlined dramatically, and that's what we're hoping. We can get money into the pockets of small businesses now that they need it, just as quickly as we can.
There's also a provision in here for tourism, which, as we know, is a huge part of our economy here and has been just decimated by all of this stuff, too. So $100 million envelope for the tourism sector and a top up of up to $15,000 for tourism businesses. Can you just explain that a little bit for me?
Yeah, you're right. They are, of course, like you rightly say, them and I suppose the restaurant, hospitality sector, tourism, small business operators, they're really hard hit. And I know that you have a lot of your members. People think, of the tourism sector as employing many large, like Harbor Air and transport companies and
BC
so forth.
Ferries.
But I'm advised that 85% of your members have fewer than 10 employees.
Correct.
And that was a surprise to me. That's a large part of it. But $105 million has been earmarked for the tourism sector. The $5 million is for the fastest growing part of the tourism sector, which is Indigenous tourism. But the $100 million is available to get them back on track. And my job is to get the message out. Please apply. It's money intended for you, and let's get on with it. These are really challenging times. I've been talking to people. I represent Oak Bay, Gordon Head, and there's a number of people who live in Oak Bay and Gordon Head parts of Victoria, and they're just hanging on by their fingernails. I haven't got to tell you at the chamber that.
Yep.
So this is money that's available right now. So please apply.
What's the turnaround time on this, Murray? How soon can people expect to access the funding?
Very, very quickly. We've hired a lot of public servants that are dedicated to this. And the hope is that, well, the deadline I should have mentioned at the outset is March 31st. So don't sit around and wait. Apply now. And the turnaround should be a matter of a few weeks, I'm hoping.
Okay.
That's what I'm advised. It's a few weeks.
I want to get into some of the really nerdy points on this just so that we can get some clarity on it and everybody understands. The grant is extended to sole proprietors with fixed costs.
Correct.
So there was something that the feds had announced a while ago that at one time people who were doing business through a personal bank account couldn't access some of the federal relief. They did change that, but this one now is extended to a sole proprietor.
Thank you for pointing that out. The other criteria that people will be happy about, I think most people will be, that the majority of the shareholders, the ownership has to be in British Columbia. We're not here to fund foreign companies that do business here or interprovincial companies. This is for our small business sector.
Yeah. Okay. So something else too, that the revenue loss has to be 30% or more. That's also an adjustment because I believe the previous number was a loss of 70% of revenue, but you've now adjusted that to be 30%. Have I got that right?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And I also should say that if you're close but not, you don't quite make that, there's some flexibility in that program as well. I want to make sure that people don't say, oh, I'm not quite there, I'm close enough. Please talk to us. There's the bureaucrats have been instructed to provide their good judgment if you're at that margin.
I want to go back to the fact that this is now a 2-page submission. It's pretty easy peasy, right, to do that. How long was the original one? I don't really know that. How many pages was it?
Several pages, and they wanted all sorts of your past remittance accounts, like your registration numbers for the GST and PST and all that. Not on any longer. Like, if you can't figure out how to fill this 2-page form, call your local MLA. It should not be difficult. It's designed to be, as you said, easy peasy.
Yeah, GST, PST, WorkSafe BC, registration numbers. Don't need to do all that stuff at all. How much actual outreach was there to the government, to the ministry, to make this change? I know that, as we said, the chambers were involved in this too, but how much other outcry was there, do you think?
I'm not able to answer it. It's never enough. It's hard to get people's attention at the best of times. And what does one do? Social media campaigns, in the newspapers, on radio. I think there's been efforts in all of those media, but I would have thought, based on the initial early pickup, that it wasn't sufficient. And that's why I'm so pleased that you're putting people like me on here to try to get the word out, Bruce. I've sent notices just in my writing to every single small business owner. I went and got business license numbers and used the mail to just let people know. I've been talking to accountants because they're going to be the ones that do these recovery business plans I've talked about. That's, I think, the best way. I hope if accountants are listening, that they will realize that all of their small businesses that are struggling, that meet these criteria, they can help. They get $2,000 each for doing it. And so there's an incentive on their part, which is deliberate, by the way, to make sure that we create the right incentives to get people to apply who need this help.
I think if people want to find this form online, the easiest thing would probably to poke around in the BC government website, or it's just called the Small Medium-Sized Business Grant Program. Just Google that, and it would probably
one
come
thing
up.
I found was it's www.bcbusinessrecoverygrant.com. That's www.bcbusinessrecoverygrant, one word.com.
Is this money that's being leveraged from another place, like another? Would it have gone somewhere else if this wasn't happening?
No, it's new money.
Okay, and
it's new money. You'll recall we met as well in gosh, it feels like forever ago, in December, just after the election, and we had a session in which we found there were $2 billion allocated that were provided as what's called supply to the government, and funding is there. Bruce, you know, Canada, including all of the provinces, has done more per percentage of GDP than any other country in the world to assist in this pandemic. I was on a meeting with the BC Business Council yesterday, and they put a dramatic slide up to show just how dramatic our governments, federal and provincial, have been in providing assistance during this pandemic as a percentage of our GDP. And compared to the United States and England and China and Japan, we are way, way ahead of those other countries.
This is a question you may not be able to answer. We don't rehearse these things. We just kind of do this, right? So I'll ask you this anyway. There are likely places where governments, including yours, are not spending money right now where they normally would, which provides a little bit of a balance in this, I suppose. The feds, the provinces, even municipalities. There are traditional places where money would be spent that's not being spent because of the pandemic.
Yeah, I would have thought perhaps there hasn't been as much money spent on. I really don't know the numbers, but let's say that if people aren't utilizing certain government services. In the middle of the pandemic, people were not going to parks as much. Now that's picked up, but there may have been therefore less money spent in some of those programs. But I'm not ashamed to tell you that we've had to go into a deficit situation. No one's going to be surprised that in the next budget, we are not going to be, as the NDP proudly announced for 3 years in succession, a balanced budget. We're not going to be there. And nobody I know expects that. I was surprised and frankly relieved to hear Aaron O'Toole, who's the Conservative leader, say that we don't expect to be in a balanced budget for 10 years. Now, I don't know if it's going to be that long. British Columbia's economy compared to any other economy in this country, and the BC Business Council pointed this out, is just doing dramatically better. We have a very diverse, balanced economy, and that's showing. But you know what? We're going to spend money when people need it. We're not ashamed of that. And if deficits are there for a couple of years, then so be it. And even the Business Council backs us up. Money is very cheap to borrow right now. As you know, it's historically cheap. Yep. And we're helping people get back on their feet. And we don't apologize for that.
You know, even when you look at what private business and industry are doing right now that they haven't necessarily talked about a lot, but things like business travel is not happening. Same with government. Right. Government's not traveling. That expense isn't there.
True.
What that's going to look
point.
Yeah, and when that comes back, I don't know what that's going to look like. I mean, even travel on domestic airlines, leisure travel was supported by business travel. Business travel was full shot. You pay the full price. That allowed people to get discounted prices on leisure travel. Not sure what that's going to do.
You're absolutely right, and of course the Zoom the Zoom phenomenon. Here we are. I'm not even driving to your studio to talk to you, right?
No.
We're all doing this by Zoom now. What's that going to mean to the commercial real estate sector in downtown centers?
Right.
Those are some things that are going to be, perhaps some people are speculating, things that will change after the pandemic, even when we can go back to working together. So there's definitely changes. Your business travel was another great example.
Yeah. We're recording this, by the way, in the podcasting studios of Czech Television. And this facility, for example, has been created for that specific purpose, that the number of people that are going to be communicating virtually instead of in person, it's facilities like this that will enable that to happen more and more for people all the time. And this is kind of an opportunity that popped up, because in any crisis, there is also opportunity. And we're seeing a lot of this stuff. You probably hear about that stuff every day. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say that this is an opportunity for significant changes. Like we've got a crisis not only with the pandemic, but anybody living in downtown Victoria will know about our other pandemic, which is the opioid crisis and so on. Well, there are some significant changes that we're making that might not have been seen as acceptable 5 years ago, but that are now seen as required by the society. And there's a number of examples where business is taking a very, very proactive view. I return to the BC Business Council and how impressed I was by their openness to embrace the opportunity that this crisis has provided. And I think we have to be bold, build back better, as Joe Biden says. That should be our mantra as British Columbians too.
You know what else, Murray? I want to ask you. You're now the Honourable Murray Rankin, Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. You've always been honourable. Now you actually carry the title. But you're a guy who had retired from elected office. You were the MP for a period of time. Then you just turned around and ran right back into the middle of this burning building that is the pandemic. Tell me about that decision and how you came to that decision and why.
Well, it really was the pandemic. I got two children, two boys, getting launched in their careers right now. And I look around and see their friends, many of whom are really hurting. They're having a hard time getting their foot on the ladder. And with the pandemic, it's only made it worse. And I don't need to tell you about the mental health implications that the pandemic has made for many, many people. And I just decided I love this community. I've lived here for many, many years now, and it was time to get back in the fray. And I've been a strong supporter of the provincial government. I had asked, the Prime Minister had asked me to serve in a nonpartisan role after I left Ottawa on a national security oversight body. I was really enjoying that, and I felt we were making a difference. But when the opportunity to come back and run and get into on the government side of the bench, which I thought was likely in the election, I thought this is the time. This is the only time. I'm getting up there in years. I don't think I'm going to have many more shots at it. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do it.
Well, it does speak to your talent and integrity, too, that the other party would reach out to you, that the Liberals would reach out to you as an NDP MP to do that. We had a session with the Chamber with our national CEO, Perrin Beatty, who served, of course, as a cabinet minister with the Conservatives. And then when he was done in office, the Liberals appointed him to be the head of the CBC. So it really speaks volumes when someone crosses the party lines like that and is recognized for their talents and abilities. Just to wrap it up, Marie, I want to ask you a little bit about your portfolio. You have an extensive background in reconciliation and Indigenous relations. I've had the pleasure and privilege of working with a number of nations in this region, too, to find out more about them. There's much work to be done in that area.
Yeah.
And you must be excited to be into that.
I am, and I just want to say, I mentioned earlier how I was impressed by the business community. The Chamber has been one of the real, at the forefront of our efforts to create this Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. They were right there from the start, talking of reconciliation, walking the talk as well. I can tell you, Bruce, 20 years ago, I was a treaty negotiator. I went all around the province. I had some successes. I had some failures. But, you know, the business community was different then than it is now. It's a simple fact. They would acknowledge it. I was at a meeting of the Association of Mineral Exploration earlier this week. A great group. And mining, as you well know, has always been a critical part of the BC economy, always. And yet, when I was dealing with those people 20 years ago, it was an entirely different phenomenon. Now they embrace reconciliation. They recognize that their workforce in the middle of rural, remote British Columbia, who's going to work there? Frequently, it's Indigenous people. Yeah. Up in the Taltan area, where we have billions of dollars of mining going on now and new ideas and new mines being proposed, 30% of the workforce is Indigenous right now. And it, of course, means many, many dollars to those remote communities and so on. So what's changed is the embrace of reconciliation. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission opened a lot of minds. The fact that every party, all three of the parties, stood up and supported the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act in this BC. This is not an NDP initiative. This is a British Columbia initiative. And I'm just so proud that I have an opportunity to play a role in it.
I think all of us as a culture, as business people, as human beings have a lot to learn from Indigenous cultures and our First Nations here about stewardship of the planet. and about the way that they operate in a way that we're trying to green our economy and be carbon neutral, and that's just ingrained in their DNA. They've done that for millennia. So we have
exactly
much to,
right.
Yeah, we have much to learn from them as we pivot into a green economy. Murray, you're a busy guy. I appreciate your time today. And again, if people want to find out more about this, they can go through their MLA's office, or they can contact the government of BC about this relief that's now available to small and medium-sized businesses. Are you having a good time? Are you enjoying
Definitely.
this? Are you?
Definitely, Bruce.
Good. Well, rest up, because we're not out of this yet. But again, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
You bet. Anytime. Murray Rankin, the Honourable Murray Rankin, MLA for Oak Bay Gordon Head, and the BC Minister for Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. And this is Chamber Chats in the studios of Czech Television. I'm Bruce Williams, CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce. See you next time for a Chamber Chat.